and welcome to Lexi's Healthy Dynamic Life. I'm Lexi, and on today's podcast, I have the pleasure of interviewing Amanda Shaffer, also known as Amanda Finds Freedom on Instagram. Thank you so much, Amanda, for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to chatting more and getting to know you better and sharing our stories.
Yay, me too. So, speaking of stories, what exactly is your story? How did you come to veganism and fruit and raw foods? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so back in, I think it was 2015, I had kind of had these escalating digestive issues. Like it had been going on for years, but it just seemed like it was getting worse and worse. And then it hit sort of this like peak in 2015, I think really around February. I had been having increasing symptoms, and they were like symptoms that were similar to colon cancer, and that runs in my family. So it was a little bit freaky, and they did a colonoscopy, and it wasn't that, thank God. But they weren't sure what the issue was, and it seemed that the colonoscopy just wound up irritating everything, and it got so much worse after that. And I wound up with a tear in the lining of my intestines. And it wasn't healing. It just wasn't healing, because I think for a long time I hadn't been absorbing nutrients properly. So I was also anemic, and I was not vegan yet. So I think the anemia played a role in my body's inability to heal itself with that issue. And so it went on for several months. They put me on so much medication. I was actually told by the pharmacist at one point that they couldn't give me any more painkillers, that my doctor had prescribed me more than what was legal in the state of Florida. so they were just pumping me full of painkillers, and I was in so much pain that I didn't get out of bed most days. I wasn't really able to work. Luckily, at the time, I've owned my first small business for 8 years, and it's an internet marketing company, so it's remote based, and I had other people who were able to run it. But for the most part, I wasn't really working. I wasn't even able to do my dishes most days. Like, just basic fundamental like self-care kind of things were really hard because I was in that much pain. And I kept asking the doctor, should I be eating something different? And they kept telling me no. And they said, they did mention fiber, but I was already eating like a pretty, what I think most people would have assumed was a healthy diet, like very whole foods, but like plenty of kind of grilled chicken with vegetables kind of things, probably on the lower carb side. Because I had always been into health, but I didn't know what I didn't know yet. And so yeah, in regards to fiber, I think that their only concern was like, are you getting 25 grams of fiber a day, regardless of the source, and regardless of whether 25 grams is even enough, because that's kind of like a bare minimum. So, and regardless of what else might have been in my diet, like if the fiber was coming from some processed like cookie bar kind of thing, they wouldn't have cared. So that was the only conversation that they had with me around food. And I really struggled for months, to the point where I was like, okay, if this is how life is going to be, I'm not saying I'm suicidal, but I am saying I am okay to just go, because this isn't living. And I was I guess I was about 26 at the time, or 26, 27 at the time. And I actually wound up fasting for a week accidentally, because I was in so much pain. I was like, I couldn't even I tried doing juices, because I had already started juicing at this point, but I couldn't even do juices. I was in so much pain. So I actually water fasted sort of accidentally for a week, and slept that entire week, like day and night, which I would argue was probably the best thing I could have done at that point in time. But I didn't know that. And that was just how bad I felt. And that didn't heal my tear or anything. And I wound up having surgery for that. And I also wound up with an infection from that surgery. So then I had another surgery for it. And through that mess, I watched a lot of YouTube videos because I was stuck in bed with nothing to do. And I came across, they're highly controversial, but I came across Freely and Durian Rider and a few other people, but they, I think, were like the biggest role in that. I think Durian Rider specifically actually had talked about having some forms of colitis and that he felt better eating all of this fruit. And I was like, okay, I already feel horrible. So like eating fruit, like it can't get any worse than this. Let me try that. And I also, there were a few books that I read, like the China Study, and I watched movies like Cowspiracy. What the Health wasn't a thing yet, like it didn't exist, but that probably would have been something I would have watched. And I just gave it a try. And it was like a virtually like overnight turnaround in how I felt. Now, I don't think that the tear would have healed on its own at that point without surgery. Unfortunately, I think it became necessary, but I think that that was more a result of not knowing what I have learned since then. And yeah, so in all of that process, through so much suffering, I made one of the best choices I've ever made in my life. And I don't think it would have happened if I hadn't been in such a severe situation, because I didn't know anyone who was vegan. I'm not sure I knew anyone who was vegetarian. So it never would have crossed my mind. And I especially didn't know anyone like raw or even like on the whole food plant-based kind of like lifestyle. It wasn't something I had ever come across, but the results, how much better I felt and how immediate it was, were just so powerful that there was no going back. So that's really how I first got started.
That's awesome. And it's unfortunate that it took having undergone that suffering to come to that realization. But now that you did make that lifestyle change, you said you experienced an overnight shift in how you felt. Do you mind sharing like what kind of differences or results you noticed right away?
Well, I wasn't in pain. So that was great. That was great. I want to give credit where credit's due. I think that the surgery for the tear, and then of course, because there was an infection from the first surgery, that I think that those were necessary for me to not be in pain. So those did happen. And I think that that second one happened around the same time that I started trying eating fruit. And I was doing fruit only at that point in time. And even with the types of fruit, it was very like mangoes, papaya. I think I had some bananas, but it was like actually more of the higher enzyme fruits, like mangoes, papayas, some pineapple. It wasn't even like a huge variety of fruits. It was very much more of like the tropical kinds, and very, very easy on digestion. And so yeah, the pain went away very quickly. And then my energy levels returned because I had been in bed for months at this point. And I think it was maybe a week or so after eating fruit, I was able to go for my first walk and even my first run shortly thereafter. So just the progression of my health going from being in bed all day, every day for 3 months to actually being outside in fresh air was like, I mean, a complete 180. So I think those were the biggest things that I noticed changes with. I did include a B12 supplement right away because I saw that that was something that they recommended. And I actually think that that had played a role in my anemia because I didn't get another test at this point in time, but my anemia symptoms went away. I had been blacking out when I stood up and that had stopped. So even though I was eating meat previously, I clearly wasn't getting enough B12. And people seem to think that B12 is just this vegan thing, but I don't know the exact science on it, but in theory it came from bacteria, and it's not something that animals are really supplying us. If anything, they're supplemented, so we're getting the supplement through like an extra step by doing that instead of just taking the supplement ourselves. So those were some of the symptoms that had gone away, and really very rapidly. I mean, still to this day, it blows my mind how quickly it improved.
Yeah, totally. I can resonate with that. I went from eating omnivorously to eating primarily fruits and some greens as well. And the first day I had fruit for breakfast, I felt 10 pounds lighter, like going up, I could run up the stairs, whereas before I felt like I was carrying a sack of potatoes. It really is remarkable. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, yeah.
And also the B12 supplementation, that's so common. I hear every day people talking about how veganism is dangerous because of B12 deficiency. And so I'm so glad that you mentioned that it's not a vegan specific issue. It's like a human wide
Mm-hmm.
situation, and eating meat isn't the solution to that.
Yeah, it gets even worse as you get older too. I think, again, I haven't brushed up on this science recently, but just based on memory, I think it was something around like 50 years of age. By then, people become even worse at absorbing B12, and it becomes really, really important to supplement B12 regardless of what you think you're eating with it. So I don't think that, and the anemia itself, I think people assume vegans are going to be anemic, and I actually had the complete opposite situation. My anemia reversed. It did become a later battle for me because I hadn't gotten in enough things like greens, so enough sources of iron for a while after like 2 years or so on veganism. But it was sort of different causes, but the same thing. But I'm no longer anemic for either reason, and I've reversed that on not just a vegan but a raw vegan diet. And so I think people assume that it will be the opposite, that like as a meat eater you won't be anemic, but if you're like a vegan then you must be anemic. Just wasn't the case for me.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing for a lot of people, but the evidence is here. And I also recommend getting tested because everyone's different. I got tested 6 months after going raw vegan, and my B12 levels were still normal. And so I decided not to supplement yet until my blood shows that I need to do that. So
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I've had blood work done for other things that I was concerned about, like hormones and stuff, within the last year, probably 3 times. And so I know, for example, that my B12 levels are good. I know that I'm not anemic, things like that. There's a lot of value in blood work. We shouldn't pretend that Western medicine serves no purpose whatsoever, I don't think. Definitely, if you're in a car accident, like you want to go to a hospital. If you need some blood work done, you should get some blood work done because it can give you so much information without really being invasive or like putting anything into your body that you don't want in there. So by all means, people should be getting their blood work done and doing regular checkups like that.
yeah. And so you kind of shared with us what led you to veganism and raw veganism. You said that you started off primarily just eating fruits, mostly the tropical fruits. Like, what happened since then? What has your journey looked like in the world of vegan and raw foods?
Yeah, so that's been an interesting experience. I guess I've been vegan now for about 5 years, and I did, after maybe just 3 or 4 weeks of really just only fruit, I did Well, maybe even earlier than that. I had already been using green juices before all of this because my digestion was so bad. It was very obvious to me that I wasn't digesting greens properly in terms of like a salad or chewing them or anything like that. So I did reintroduce green juice fairly quickly, but I don't think that I had enough of it. It wasn't really a priority. It wasn't something that, for example, Freely and Durian Rider talked much about. They were just like fruit and carbs and fruit and carbs and fruit and carbs. And that's great, but we do need our higher mineral content foods, I think, as well. So since then, I suppose for that first year, I really settled into kind of, after a few months, mostly raw vegan, maybe some raw till 4 style eating, some like potatoes with things like romaine and different sauces and stuff. Very low fat, definitely kept my fitness levels where I wanted them to be. And then I started traveling, and that was really fun. One of the places I went was like Costa Rica, and it was like the holy grail for for awesome exotic fruit and stuff like that. So so around that time though, after Costa Rica, I had started dating someone, and he was also vegan, and you know, great person. Not, this isn't a reflection on him in any way in terms of just who he is as a person, but he ate very differently than I did, despite us both being vegan. And so he definitely did more of the like protein shake kind of a thing, like muscle building kind of a thing. Definitely a lot more things like Chinese takeout, or like lots of like heavier pasta dishes, or I mean really delicious foods, things like Beyond Meat kind of stuff, and or field roast or something, because I'm not even sure if Beyond Meat was a thing yet then, but yeah, lots of stuff like that. And it worked just fine for him. He had like an iron stomach, so like, good for him. Um, Being surrounded by those things, it was easier for me to say no to just like a non-vegan food, because it just wasn't even food to me anymore. Because there were so many other things involved with that around like ethics and everything, not just my health. But being around what I'll just call kind of vegan junk food type options more often, you know, definitely on a scale, some of them were healthier, but it was harder to say no to those things. And it also brought me to question, am I doing this right? Because I'm still at this point maybe kind of new. It was maybe a year and a half into being vegan, and maybe my way wasn't totally perfect. Maybe there was room for improvement, which would be fair. But I think what wound up happening was that I sort of swung to another end of the spectrum in veganism. And it wasn't as good for digestion, that was for sure. But as I've gotten older, and especially as I've passed 30, I've noticed that like maintaining muscle tone has become more important to me. So there was an element of like, okay, maybe I care more about protein now. And I will say, overall, it just didn't serve me long term. It didn't get me the fitness results that I wanted. If anything, it triggered maybe more addictive behavior around food. It triggered more possibly even inflammation with some of those foods. It just didn't seem to work for me. It seemed like I had more trouble digesting or accessing nutrients from certain types of food because I just didn't have any energy after I ate it. I mean, it was just a totally different experience. But at that point, I also really liked the taste. So that was like a really hard pill to swallow after that. So I think that went on, and it wasn't, I still ate a lot of fruit. I don't want to pretend like that wasn't still a big part of my diet, but that went on for probably 2 years or so of not really knowing how I should go about eating vegan. And I kind of got into Marcus Rothkranz and Kara Brotman. And I still really adore them, and I buy some of their supplements. I love how they do like freeze-dried wild herbs and things like that in their supplements. They're actual whole food supplements. So I think those are absolutely stellar, but they eat what would be almost like a keto raw vegan. Like they eat, or not keto, but maybe very low carb. Like they eat very low carb raw vegan, lots of nuts and seeds, and they'll use like olive oil and salt and things like that, but not a lot of fruit, especially for Kara. She doesn't seem to do a lot of fruit. And so I did try that for a little bit. And that was interesting because I felt really, really good in the beginning on that. And then it was, so that was really exciting for me. And I was eating more greens than I had ever eaten. But I also, from a long-term perspective, like 8 months, 10 months down the road, I was not feeling good anymore. And I was feeling really lethargic again. And it was like mostly, it was pretty much all raw foods. I've never really been like what I would consider a purist about my raw food choices. I will eat like some cooked legumes if I feel like it's the best choice in a given situation. But I wasn't feeling good anymore. And I discovered that I was having hormone issues. I had actually lost my period for a little while around that time. And again, I sort of floundered and didn't really know what to do. It was like, well, okay, I've tried this way of veganism. I've tried this way of veganism. Now I'm having hormone issues. Like, what is this? My previous symptoms from sort of an undiagnosed IBD, they thought it was Crohn's. Those were not showing up. Like, veganism itself is just like kind of a blanket solution to that for me. But I wasn't feeling energetic. I wasn't at the fitness goals that I was at when I had started eating this kind of low carb, raw vegan, lots of avocados and salads and stuff kind of thing. And so for a few months, I tried all kinds of different things again. I had like some vegan protein shake kind of things again. I had vegan junk food again because I was like, why am I even trying? I don't care. This was around the time that my dog passed away, so there was a lot of emotions involved with that too. So maybe I would have felt like crap no matter what I was eating, to be honest. But it kind of was really disheartening for me. And it was this weird realization after all of that I was like, well, okay, I've been vegan for almost 5 years now. When did I feel my best? When I first went vegan. What was I eating then? Mostly fruit, but also what have I learned since then? Okay, maybe I should prioritize my greens. Maybe I should have some sprouts. Maybe I should, do it a little differently than how I did it when I first started out, but get closer to that. And so that's really where I'm at now. And so that's been maybe the last like 10 months or so. But the thing with that is I feel better and better and better and better. It's not it hasn't been something where it seemed to work short term for whatever short term goal I had or for whatever immediate thing I was trying to fix. It's something that has provided more of the sustainability and the long-term value in this kind of way of eating raw vegan that I think is a little bit more balanced. I definitely don't do zero fat at this point. I am selective about when I eat my fats. Like I try to eat them in combination with greens. I do sprouts all the time now. Like it's separated, so it looks delicious, right? But this is one of my big green smoothies that I make most days, and it has quite a lot of lentil sprouts in there. It's a little more on the nutritious than delicious side, but it's not bad. Like it's still got pineapple and orange and lime. The lime makes like a huge difference. I love adding lime to it, but it's just a nutritional powerhouse. I mean, like how can I not do this for my body most days? It's just fantastic. And then the sprouts are so cheap and easy to do at home yourself. So I do feel like I've returned to where I was when I first went vegan in terms of how I feel and fitness and everything, but also in terms of how I eat, there's a lot of similarities to that. But I also think that I've grown and improved upon it. I'm not neglecting greens. I'm not neglecting minerals. I feel like it's a little bit more balanced. That makes sense.
That totally makes sense. And it's so cool to hear about that journey of starting with fruit, exploring all the different corners of what it could mean to be vegan, because there
Mm-hmm.
are so many different expressions of eating a vegan diet, and then how it came full circle, what you learned from all that, and just really practicing self-awareness and learning, like, okay, what is causing what results do I want, and what will it take to achieve that?
Mm-hmm.
So that's super cool.
Yeah, and consistency is so important. If you're bouncing all over the place with your diet, even within, the vegan spectrum, because there's so many different ways to be vegan. I really don't think that the vegan part itself is the hard part. Like there's so many different ways. You can do whatever you want on a vegan lifestyle. But in terms of sort of cherry picking the things that you like and paying attention to how your body responds to things, and identifying where you actually want to go, instead of just sort of bouncing around and almost doing a different, like, vegan keto one week and then high carb vegan the next week. You're not going to feel good doing that, because whichever path you pick, if you're not consistent enough with it to let it work for you, then you're going to kind of feel icky. And I've actually had someone that I'm coaching right now who has had that. She's sort of all over the map in terms of what she's tried, and I can relate, because I felt a little lost and confused for a while in there, and it was kind of like, well, why not vegan junk food then? Like, I just don't care right now. But you have to just pick something based on your goals and then stick with it long enough to see whether it's working and whether it's sustainable for you. You can't, if you're bouncing around, you can't know for sure what is working at that point.
Absolutely. And so at this point, does it feel like having a high fruit with greens and sprouts diet, does that seem like the sustainable choice for you?
Yeah, definitely. If anything, it's given me more freedom, which is all what I'm about. The different ways that we can experience freedom. It's just such a simple way of eating that I don't feel tied to the kitchen. I don't feel like worried about what I'm eating next. I don't feel like I have to plan all of these elaborate things and have like this crazy list when I go to the grocery store. Like, I know what my basics are. I know what I can do with those kinds of things. I know what kind of staples I can keep around that like won't go bad, like sun-dried tomatoes or dates or whatever. Like, it's really just kind of easy. Do you feel that way too?
Yeah, that's one of the main reasons I love it. It's so easy. When I'm hungry, I just pick up a fruit or maybe make a smoothie depending on what's ready to go. And also for people that live an on-the-go lifestyle, like, it's
Mm-hmm.
literally the world's fastest food, and it's often self-contained as well. So no need for extra waste. I totally resonate with that.
Yeah.
And so what are the other ways that you've come to experience freedom?
So obviously with the food, there's like freedom from pain, which is a great thing. You want freedom to be able to be healthy enough to be running and jumping and skipping. And I mean, when I finish my workouts, I feel like having a dance party still. Like, that's an immense amount of freedom in and of itself. Exactly. But then there's also things like time freedom and location freedom. And I've had location freedom for quite a while because of my first small business. It's 8 years old. I've worked remotely the entire time because with internet marketing, everything's on the internet. So like, why bother with the overhead of an office and all of that? That just is silly. So that, in that regard, I've had location freedom for a long time, and I've sort of popped around all over just different random areas, like around Florida and Alabama and South Carolina and Mexico and Nicaragua and Costa Rica. And if you haven't been to Costa Rica, I highly recommend it. It's kind of like my first home, to be honest. But yeah, so that's been really enjoyable. Also, that of course enables me to do things like come back to Florida and help family members when they're going through surgeries and stuff like that, because I can work from wherever I'm at, just with my laptop. I don't have to be anywhere specific to get my work done, which I think more people are experiencing this year. And a funny silver lining to this year, it's something people are sort of experiencing, and maybe businesses are getting a little bit more used to. It's getting a little normalized. So maybe in the future that will offer more location freedom to more people that way, which I think would be wonderful. There's a certain level of like openness that I think is hard to reach with the way that you think until you've experienced and sort of immersed yourself in other cultures, and that experience promotes more empathy, and that's something that we really need in this world really badly. Time freedom is something that I'm still working on a lot. With my first business, there are clients and we're on set schedules with specific calls and agendas, and I mean, I certainly don't get to create those are, you know, for the clients to choose. I have, I think, done a pretty great job of being more selective about what clients we take on. So ones who are more respectful of my time and more respectful of my personal needs, and they understand the fact that everyone needs to be able to recharge, to be able to be good at their job, so you're not just on call 24/7. That sort of thing. But that's also part of why I've gotten into my Amanda Finds Freedom channels. I've, ever since going vegan 5 years ago and watching so many YouTube videos, I've been like, I want to do that. I want to share my story. I'm doing now. I want to do something that gives back, that helps inspire other people. But also, to be really, really honest and kind of selfish, it's like a creative release for me. And so if I can do some of that in terms of my path in life, that gives me even more time freedom, because I get to choose when I'm going to create whatever piece of content and what it's going to look like. And I get to choose the topic for it. And it offers more freedom around, hey, I want to go surfing this morning. I can shoot that video this afternoon then. You know, there's nobody else's schedule to worry about in that. So those are some of the ways, some of them, I think, more obvious ways that I've explored freedom in recent years. It's sort of a bottomless bucket. I mean, there is an experience of freedom in basically everything that we do, and you can either feel that way or not. And if you're not feeling free, then maybe you need to take a step back and ask yourself why, and how you might be able to get there. Honestly, going back to the health stuff, we had one of the most stressful clients we'd ever had when I had my digestive issues sort of peak in 2015. So if you're just stressed out all the time and not feeling like you're free to be who you are, that has negative effects on your health, no matter what you're eating. You can be eating the best diet in the world, and if you're just really stressed out, you're still going to have issues. So yeah, I think that those are important parts of health, honestly.
I just really love and appreciate you sharing that. And hopefully, if you're listening today, something resonates with you on maybe an action step you can take this week, or just even something to think about, and how you can feel more free and enjoy this beautiful life, this dance of life. So, Amanda, I just want to thank you so much for diving into your story and sharing your experience. I'm wondering if you have any last words of wisdom or advice that you'd like to share.
I guess you're always looking for that like perfect thing to say, or like the perfect sign off, as I've been like learning about creating content and stuff. definitely, I'd like to remind everyone that your choice matters, whatever your choice is. Even if it seems like it doesn't affect anyone else, it does. We're all here together in a shared experience. So your choice does matter, and it matters for you too. And the other thing I would say would just be in my very recent new experiments with learning things about Instagram and YouTube. And now I'm here with Lexi. Don't be afraid to go out of your comfort zone. Honestly, there's a lot of fun to be had out there, and there's a lot of good reasons to not do things. But fear probably shouldn't be your only reason to not do something. Fear of being judged, fear of, I recently learned to surf, like fear of sharks or like falling face down in the water and everybody seeing you. Like, those are just not good enough reasons to not be living your life, because that's really what you're depriving yourself of when you do that.
So good. Such a perfect golden nugget to finish this podcast episode. So thank you again so much, Amanda. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on the show. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. And so if you aren't already, be sure to follow Amanda on Instagram and YouTube, Amanda Finds Freedom. And I'm Healthy Dynamic Life. We'd love to keep in touch and continue to inspire health and wellness and loving life. So thank you very much for listening, and I wish you a happy, healthy, and dynamic day. Bye.
Bye.